Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bill Hannabass. I'm the city manager of Oak Hill. Welcome to the first of 4 lectures celebrating Black history in commemoration of Black History Month in Oak Hill, West Virginia. Today is February 5th, 2022, and we have lectures each Saturday this month at 6 p.m. On February 12th, we will have a presentation by Reverend Ronald English. On February the 19th, Dr. Brucella Jordan. And on February 26th, Reverend Matthew Watts. It is my pleasure to introduce this evening the first speaker in this series. He currently serves as a mayor of Oak Hill. He is an educator, having taught at 3 high schools in Fayette County, West Virginia, and was a professor of history at Glenville State College. He served as an elected member of the Fayette County Board of Education for 12 years and as a circuit clerk of Fayette County for 12 years. It is an honor for me to present my friend and colleague, Mayor Danny Wright.
I think there needs to be some special thanks to some people who have made this series possible with giving the City Hall over to this lecture series, plus the funds to carry it out. And that is the City Council of Oak Hill. By unanimous vote, approved this lecture series, made up of Charles Smallwood, Tom Oxley, Dave Perry, Diana Janey, Krista Hodges, Benitez Jackson, and Steve Hazlett, as well as the work done by the city manager, Bill Hannabass, getting all this set up, all the technical things that have to be done, and the coordinator of economic development, public relations, Aaron Reed, right over here, done a tremendous job of getting the word out throughout the community, and to I think a couple of 3 counties got due to you, Aaron Reed, and the administrative assistant, Rhonda Falk, who prepared the program. I think Oak Hill may be one of the very few towns in the state, if not the only one, to have a series of lectures Black History Month for every single Saturday in the month of February. And February is chosen as Black History Month because of the birthdays of 2 important figures in the history of the Black experience. And that was Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln. Both had birthdays in February. And that's why that Carter Woodson, the founder of Black History Month, or started out as Black History Week in 1926. Carter Woodson was a professor, an educator, publisher, writer, a college administrator, PhD from Harvard, second Black to get a PhD from Harvard, and the first, whose parents were slaves, was Carter G. Woodson. And the interesting point about Carter Woodson is that he once lived in Fayette County. He taught at Winona. Some of you may not know where that town is across the river going towards Lookout. Is a town of Winona that was a major cooperating town in its day. At one time had 5,000. Woodson taught there from 1897 to 1900. He worked in the coal mines, and then when school was in session, he taught school. When school was out, back to the mines. So he did both, mines as well as teaching. So we have a connection to the founder of Black History Month. Fayette County does. I think by the time I get through here tonight, you will find that Fayette County's had a tremendous connection to a great deal of African American history in not only West Virginia, but in the United States. What I'm about to discuss is a paper I did so many years ago, 80-some pages. I decided to just synthesize it into an article I wrote for a magazine long ago. So here's the synthesized copy. You'll have as all 80 pages, but I talked him out of it that we're going to hold it in here. 80 pages. Maybe another time we'll do the rest of it. It's a long, drawn-out paper, and I don't think we're here to hear all that. It's rather complicated in some parts. I think we do just the highlights of this particular session. You know, when it comes to Black history, if you look at history books when you were in school, many of you, did you ever see much mention about African American history or contributions to the American experience? Did you ever see? Rarely, if ever. I never saw it in history books when I was at Collins High School. I'll just give you an example. You may have heard of this book, The History of Fayette County by Peters and Carden, written in 1926. It's the definitive history of Fayette County. It's 771 pages. How much space do you think is given over to the contributions of Black Fayette County? 1/2 page. That's it. Women get less than that. They don't even get a half page in this book. A few pictures here and there. So this is the kind of contributions that we've overlooked for so many years in who has made America, who's made Fayette County, who's made West Virginia. It's always white Anglo-Saxon Protestant men. All of America was made by white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. That's all you ever saw in the textbooks. Rarely anyone else. No Asian Americans, no Latinos, no one. Women just got a page here and there. Well, I think that's the reason that Carter Woodson, back in 1926, said it's time to correct that. I have a quote here from Carter Woodson I always liked. He says, quote, "Those who have no record of what their forebears have accomplished lose the inspiration which comes from the teaching of biography and history. Those who have no record of what their forebears have accomplished lose the inspiration that comes with the understanding of biography and history." I think Carter Woodson had it right. We need to understand what our forebears did. White, Black, Asian, Latino, everybody played an important part in the making of America. It wasn't all Thomas Jefferson and George Washington. It was the common folk who did a lot more than what people are given credit in textbooks anymore. In order to take a look at the Fayette County experience regarding Black politics, I'm covering the years 1896 to 1918, which was the height, the zenith of Black political participation in Fayette County, which was 100 years ago. It was the end of the period in which Black Fayette Countyans did so much for the county as well as for the state. As you know, the Western Virginia never had a large Black population. These counties in the western part of our state had very small Black population. The western counties that became West Virginia, small population. And there are reasons for that. One, the climate is not conducive to plant a lot of cotton, tobacco, and other plantation crops. It just wasn't suitable. The climate was not, and the land was not. The topography was very hilly, rocky, and you couldn't really have plantation lifestyle in these counties. Plus, look at the people who settle Western Virginia. They're not the same who settle Eastern Virginia. They're German, they're Irish, Scotch Irish, they're Quakers. And there are many groups who settle West Virginia who don't like the concept of slavery to begin with. They don't like it. They don't promote it. They don't support it. So right then and there, you already have a people, you have a topography, you have a climate not conducive to slavery. Now, it's not to say there weren't any slaves in West Virginia, but the numbers are much, much smaller in Eastern Virginia. Piedmont and the Tidewater and the Valley of Virginia. Those are the areas heavily populated with slavery to take care of the plantation crops. Now, when Lincoln issued his proclamation, his Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, you realize he did not free the slaves in places where he could have. Everybody thinks that Lincoln freed all the slaves with the Emancipation Proclamation. He did not. He only freed them in areas where he had no authority. He freed them in the South, which ignored them. He did not free them in states that had slaves but were loyal to the Union, such as Missouri, Kentucky, Western Virginia, or West Virginia later, Maryland, Delaware. Those slave states did not have their slaves freed. Lincoln was worried if he freed those slaves, they were very, very fragilely tied to the south, to the north. He's afraid that would break and all those states would join the Confederacy. He didn't free slaves here. He freed them in Eastern Virginia, but not West Virginia. He didn't free them in those other states I mentioned to you, Kentucky, Missouri, and Maryland, and Delaware, all slave states, all not affected by the proclamation. So when Lincoln issued that, it didn't affect anybody here. It took an act of the legislature in 1865 to free the slaves in West Virginia, or West Virginia then, not the Emancipation Proclamation. Well, let's take a look at what did bring blacks to West Virginia after the Civil War. They came to West Virginia in large numbers to jobs in the mines. The mines needed every able-bodied person to come in and work those mines. And many former slaves left the South, tired of picking cotton and tobacco, making little or nothing, being mistreated, came to West Virginia by now to work in the coal mines and paying much more. And working side by side with white coal miners, there developed a camaraderie between those two that was not like what you see in or just Virginia by now. The C&O Railroad hired thousands of blacks from all over the place to come in and work. When they're building the railroad all the way to Huntington, Collis P. Huntington in 1871 finished the railroad to Huntington, named the town after himself, Huntington, and he employed thousands of blacks and many who stayed in this whole area and did not go anywhere else. They were leaving in large numbers between 1863 and 1870, but in 1871, when the railroad went through, stayed on to work for Collis P. Huntington and other railroads that were coming through as well. Well, let's take a look at these men who made a mark in Fayette County's political history between 1896 and 1918. In 1896, West Virginia, only being a state for 33 years, elected the first black in state history to the legislature from Montgomery. Fayette County was the very first African American sent to the legislature in West Virginia history, came right out of Fayette. Who was Chris H Payne? Probably never heard of him, have you? He receives virtually no recognition in textbooks. Even on West Virginia textbooks, you'd be hard pressed to find his name saying he was the first African American in the legislature. You'll probably find it there. I know the ones I had never mentioned. Payne lived in Montgomery. He was a newspaper publisher, published 3 newspapers. He was also a minister, college graduate, very active in civic affairs, very prominent in black people, very active in the Republican Party. In those days, virtually all African Americans were Republican because of the party of Lincoln. Emancipation Proclamation. The Republican Party in those days was very much pro civil rights for African Americans across here, but across the United States. So virtually all black voters were Republican. Now I say black voters. You see something here that you don't see anywhere else. In West Virginia, free blacks could vote. Not in Virginia, not in Kentucky, not in Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina, nowhere. They could vote in West Virginia. I think kind of odd, different. Did West Virginia have integration at that time? No, very segregated. Schools were segregated, movies were segregated, or theaters segregated, public transportation segregated. Everything was segregated. But African Americans could cast the vote and run for office. You're wondering, how can that be? Strong segregation, Jim Crowism, and on the other hand, can vote and run for office. How can that be in a state? Isn't that a rather confusing situation to have? Can vote, run for office, can't sit in a restaurant. It's interesting. As a white person, you could go out and campaign for this person. You could put up signs, hand out literature, whatever you wanted. Give money, work like a dog for this black candidate. But if you had a victory party, you all could not go into a restaurant, sit down and have it together. Strange. West Virginia had a very unique situation regarding social and economic segregation, but not political segregation. There wasn't. Whites and blacks could mix politics. Now you're wondering why that is. It is odd. But I just happen to know why that is. How that happened. After the Civil War, 1865, West Virginia was created from the Civil War. The only state to be created out of the Civil War, West Virginia. If you're watching Jeopardy, this was a question, folks, some months ago. The youngest state east of Mississippi. What is West Virginia? What is West Virginia? Youngest state east of Mississippi. In West Virginia, the Republicans had control of the state legislature and the governorship from 1863 to 1872. For 9 years, it was a Republican-dominated legislature and governor. Everything after the Civil War, or during and after, I guess, 63. During that time that the legislature passed a whole series of very, very restrictive rules on former Confederate soldiers in the war. You could not vote, so on a jury, be a doctor, a lawyer, teacher, you could do anything if you had fought for the Confederacy. West Virginia passed a whole series of laws called the War Laws, and they stripped you of the ex-Confederates of any and all rights. You could not vote, couldn't do anything. However, under the 15th Amendment to the Constitution, blacks could cast a vote. The federal Constitution, they could. Many Republicans, as well as all the Democrats, said that's not fair that these white ex-Confederates are coming home, can't vote, but freed slaves can. So, a member of the legislature named W.H. Flick from Pendleton County, former Union soldier, he introduced a bill called the Flick Amendment that would allow all males to cast a vote, white or black. So he threw that out to the voters. The voters approved the Flick Amendment in 1871. So now what do you have? Now, since the ex-Confederates are coming home in droves, and how do they vote? Solid. Yeah. You wouldn't find a Republican in the Confederate group coming home. None. Now all these ex-Confederates have been barred from voting by the war laws, now can vote. And they voted in mass, and they voted straight Democratic all the way down on every single office. What happens? Republicans are ousted from power in 1872. Democrats take charge, and they control the legislature, the governorship, attorney general, everything. They have it. So they decided to do a couple of things. One, we're going to write a new constitution. They moved the Constitutional Convention to Charleston, wrote a new one down there. We had one in Wheeling, Charleston write one. And they tried their best to strip all freed blacks from any rights, voting, holding office, anything, serving on juries, doing anything. Well, it failed by a very small margin, barely failed. The Flick Amendment all it did was give everybody the right to vote. All men, no women, black or white, just men. And they were voting overwhelmingly Democratic because all the Confederates are coming home. They're voting as a block. They're voting for every Democrat on the ballot. And it's worked. It puts them in charge. They change a lot of things. You know, when they met at the Constitutional Convention in Charleston, they met in Charleston for one reason. They didn't have any hotels. They didn't have any good roads in there. They didn't have any real railroads to speak of going in there. They went there for one reason. Charleston had been pro-Confederate. He went pro-Union. They took it out of Wheeling. Charleston. They argued over whose flag they should take, the Confederate flag or the Union flag. And someone had to be carrying a Union flag with them. That's the reason they put it up. Even else had a Confederate. So they stuck that up. They want to change the name of Grant County to Lee County, Lincoln County to Davis County. That almost passed, but they decided to come back and try to get that late, which they never did. But they were going to even change the name of counties to Confederate names. It was very much a pro-Virginia type constitution. Almost, in fact, look at the name of the legislature, the House of Delegates, like Virginia. The governor's going to have one term, like Virginia. It was almost a carbon copy of much of the Virginia Constitution, because it was a pro-Confederate, pro-Virginia type constitution. The convention in 1872 did. So they tried to strip blacks from the right to vote, and they tried to do whatever they could to stop blacks from moving into the area to work in the mines, to work on the railroads, anything they could do to put stumbling blocks that they tried, but it did not work. That's why so many blacks made it into the western counties after the Civil War, because this 1872 Constitution, these governors, legislatures did not succeed in putting stumbling blocks in place. By the way, between 1872 and 1896, 24 years, we all Democratic governors. From 72 to 96, we all Democratic, 24 years. It's called the Bourbon Era, the Bourbon governors. Now, it doesn't refer to something to drink. Well, they probably did imbibe in some bourbon, those governors did. But that's not why they're called the Bourbon governors. Because it goes back to the royal family of France, the Bourbons, the Louis were ultra-conservative. So these governors were very ultra-conservative on everything, nothing on civil rights, by the way, these governors. So they were referred to as the Bourbons, the Bourbon Era. So if you ever see that again in a history book, it refers to conservative Democrat governors, 24 years, 72, getting with John J. Jacob and ending with William Corkle. Those and all the governors. Christopher H. Payne was able to withstand all this because he wasn't getting a lot of help for sure from Charleston. He was born in 1848 in Monroe County. He was given basic education by his mother. He was taught to work hard and learn. Education, number one in his mother's heart, working. She said that if you have a good education, your work will come much easier. I don't know if that's really true. That's what she pushed on her children, especially into Christopher. He went off to become a minister, like many people did in those days. They were the most learned people in town, were ministers. He went off to the Richmond Theological Institute, Richmond, Virginia, to study theology, ministry, and graduated with honors. He received a Doctor of Divinity degree from the University of Louisville as an honorary doctor, University of Louisville. And he settled in Fayette County in Montgomery, where he operated those papers. I told you, his papers always had a hard way to go. They would collapse, and his one, and that would go on the wayside. He had a hard time. There was the Eagle, there was the Advocate, there was the Enterprise. All these papers he developed, they catered primarily to Black audiences, and oftentimes he had a hard time selling ads to white businesses who did not want to give any kind of help in terms of keeping his paper afloat. He was a very, very strong supporter of a school called Bluefield State. Bluefield State College did not exist in the 1895. And Christopher H. Payne, a minister, He traveled a great deal to preach. A teacher, newspaper editor, publisher, was well known in the Black community, very well known, and also throughout the white community in the 1890s. In those days, folks, if a Black person wanted to go to college in West Virginia, you had one choice. That choice was that you could go to Storer College in Harpers Ferry, Store. Storer College was a Free Will Baptist school, private school. It was the only school in the state offering higher ed Black citizens. That was it, one and only. And it was not a state school. Now, the Black population was growing rapidly by the 1890s in the southern counties, maybe not so much everywhere else. There was a big push for a Black school in somewhere in the southern counties. And Christopher H. Payne, along with several other Black educators and activists, such as Moss Meadows and Joseph Simpson and Christopher H. Payne, pushed the legislature to establish a school called the Bluefield Colored Institute in Bluefield, West Virginia. It's 1891. It's not fully a college. Christopher H. Payne, after promoting that and working very hard, continued lobbying the legislature to make it a college, which by 1895 they did. It was a segregated college. No whites could go. There would be a second all-Black college that the state will operate at West Virginia State Institute, which is now State University. That was all-Black college as well. So if an up-and-coming young Black person wanted to go to college in West Virginia, you're down to, you have 3 choices by 1900. And those were Bluefield, West Virginia State, and Storer. What if you want to get a master's degree? What if you graduate from Bluefield State and you want a master's degree? Could you go to West Virginia University? No. Marshall started offering master's programs at 40. Could you go to Marshall later? No. What did the state do about that? If you say, well, I have a right, I pay taxes, I want to go to one of those schools. I'm smart enough. I want in. Don't leave me out. You're just doing it because of my race. You know. What state of West Virginia did? They said, okay, you can have a master's degree. You find a school that you want to have them that will take you in, we'll pay the tuition. There are lots of older Black teachers in this county who have master's degrees from Yale, Columbia, Penn State, Ohio State. Because the state would pick up your tab so you wouldn't go to Marshall or West Virginia University. You can't have a master's from there, but we'll give you one from Harvard. Is that okay? Is that just as good or what? That's how that was done up until the 50s. I've interviewed some of those older Black teachers who told me those stories. One of my cooperating teachers, she said her master's was from Columbia. Wow. She said, I had no choice. They wouldn't let me go to Marshall. Go to WU. So they said, we'll pay your way for Columbia. You get in, you go. So she said, well, they pay my way there. In 1896, he's elected to the legislature from Fayette County. Like I said, he was put on the taxation and finance committees. He was successful with a bill to promote and to extend the offerings at West Virginia Tech, which is Montgomery at the time. He also promoted higher education for more and more, not just of Black students, but for anybody. He promoted state involvement with some sort of help with higher ed. He pushed for that. He also pushed for more safety in the coal mines, that the state get involved with having inspections and closing mines down and doing those kinds of things. Very progressive ideas Christopher H. Payne had. In those days, the legislature only met every other year in the 2-year term. So you didn't get 2 sessions, you got 1 session. That was, you didn't go in 1897, you skip it and go to 98, then 99 you're out. It was a strange setup. You did not have the 2 sessions, even though it was 2 years, you only got 1 session in Charleston. So he got his session in, did not run again in 1898. He continued to promote higher ed and to promote safety in the mines. He also pushed for some sort of highway construction, which cars were just starting to come about a little bit by then, not much. But he's promoting it. Also river travel. He wanted to dredge the river, make river traffic a little smoother, a little nicer, and also to bring in more business. He thought through using barges and that kind of thing. He was always looking ahead, economically, educationally, and everything else. Christopher Payne was out on the forefront. You think that's the end of Christopher Payne in one term in the House, the first ever? By the way, no newspaper in this area covered his being elected as the first. No one in this southern part. You know where I found it? In the Wheeling Intelligencer. Wheeling about it. No one in the southern part. Peterson Cardin's book in 1926. No mention. None whatsoever, though he never existed. In 1903, he was appointed by Teddy Roosevelt. President Roosevelt appointed him as Consul General to the Danish West Indies, which is now the American Virgin Islands. So he went to the Virgin Islands in 1903, Consul General, which is a position just below that of ambassador, and he served there until 1925. Now, after he was through being Consul General, he became the judge advocate of the island. Was one of the top judges to handle cases similar to the Supreme Court. He did that in the Virgin Islands until his death in 1925. So that's Christopher H. Payne, who not only promoted good things for Fayette County and West Virginia, but he went on to somewhat national, international recognition under Teddy Roosevelt, sending the Danish West Indies, which is now the Virgin Islands. It was changed in 1917 when the United States bought it from Denmark, and then it switched its name to the American Virgin Islands. The second Black elected to the legislature was James Ellis, an attorney who practiced in Oak Hill. He served 3 terms in the House of Delegates, the only Black elected from Fayette County to serve more than 1 term. They all served 1 term except him. And he was at 3 terms. In fact, the city of Oak Hill, some months ago, ordered a West Virginia historic marker to be placed in town to commemorate the work of James Ellis. And we're still waiting for it, aren't we? It said 7 to 11 months then. But we've been waiting for that marker. Maybe April or so, you think? April, May will be here, so we'll have a special program to unveil the James Ellis historic marker as being the second Black to serve in the legislature. Now, there is a historic marker for Payne in Montgomery, but someone hit it. I think it's now in City Hall. It needs to be put back up. Someone drove it off by accident. And so Christopher H. Payne has a marker, historic marker. It's down right now in Montgomery. James Ellis was born in Augusta County, Virginia, over near Stanton, in 1879. Again, like Payne, his mother and father both taught him the importance of education. He did not go off to become a minister or a publisher. He went off to become a lawyer, graduating from Howard University in 1898, which is a predominantly Black school in Washington. First set up his practice in Mount Hope in 1898. Stayed there a few years before he moved to Oak Hill. James Ellis is an interesting character. I interviewed some people who had practiced law with Mr. Ellis. He died in 1957. Walking across the road there in Channel 4 and a car hit him. That's what happened to Mr. Ellis. And I interviewed some lawyers who had worked with him. And something they pointed out to me, they said he was always for the underdog, especially coal miners. Said he loved coal miners. And the United Mine Workers endorsed him every time he ran. Interesting that he was he took coal miner cases. If you had coal miner attached to you, he was there. James Ellis. That's what these attorneys had told me who practiced with. He was very much pro-labor. In 1902, he was elected to the House of Delegates. He was reelected. Well, certainly take a look at the 1903 session first. He was on the Printing and Contingent Expenses Committee. He was reelected in 1906 and 1908. serving 3 terms. He was on the Claims and Sanitation Committees. He was on the Taxation Committee. And during his time in the legislature, he had 2 major, maybe 3. He pushed for better roads, he pushed for better education, and for better treatment of minors' labor. Those were the 3 major points that Ellis made while he was in the legislature, those 3 terms. The third Black elected was H Rayleigh. He also was from Montgomery, born in 1867 in Virginia. H Rayleigh graduated from West Virginia Colored Institute, which is now West Virginia State University. He took an interest in county politics, served on the book examiner committee in those days, which nothing like it exists today, where they examined textbooks and what they were looking for. He was on the board. The county commission had appointed him to county court. He served on that board in 1902, and then he went on to the legislature in 1904, and he got on the labor committee, and he was also promoting very much the same thing you see with these other Black elected legislators. They're looking at better education as a ladder to success, and they're looking for better infrastructure. They're promoting anti-lynching laws, which many states in the South, if Blacks were lynched, the local government would turn a blind eye, and all these men promoted that as well in the legislature. So the very first three members of the Black members of the legislature in West Virginia history from Fayette County, including the founder of Black History Month, taught and lived in Fayette County. Fayette County does have a strong connection to Black History Month, more so than many other counties. There have been 21 Blacks elected to the legislature in West Virginia history. 21 Blacks total. Which county do you think is the most in West Virginia history? Of all the counties, McDowell, 11. It had 6. There are 2 here I'm not talking about tonight. That's be another story, but Lucille Meadows and Frank Robinson, those are 2 others. We had 6 from Fayette, 11 from McDowell. So out of 21, 17 come from 2 counties, Fayette and McDowell. Now, what about Rayleigh's 1 term? Rayleigh, while he's in there, he promotes the same thing the others have promoted, except he adds something to it. He promotes the idea that there should be a colored orphans home to take care of orphaned Black children. He also wants a colored, he called it, state hospital to take care of Blacks who are in need of medical care with some help from the state. And he also pushed for a colored mental institution to handle problems in the Black community with mental health. He promoted all those things, and they were all passed. He got them all through the legislature, all of them. He also, after his term was up, he became a field agent for the colored orphans home, trying to find children who need to go there. But he reached his peak in 1921 when Governor Morgan appointed him as the superintendent of the colored orphans home. So he will move on to Huntington and serve there in 1933, superintendent, first Black superintendent over any agency in West Virginia would be H Rayleigh, also from Montgomery. One thing I forgot to mention to you about Ellis. In 1915, Ellis appeared before the West Virginia Supreme Court to argue a case against another African-American attorney from Fayetteville, Sweeney. Attorney Sweeney. Those 2 were on opposite sides debating an issue before the Supreme Court. The issue is very boring. It's about paying your dues to be a member of the Red Man Society, and in order to get a burial from it. It's involved and it's boring, but that's what they were there for. To appeal this decision of the courts. regarding who had to pay. That is the first time in West Virginia history that two Black attorneys appeared and argued for the West Virginia Supreme Court. So Ellis also gets a first. He's the very first attorney on Mr. Sweeney. In fact, I did my student teaching at Mr. Sweeney's daughter. Sweeney and Ellis for the Supreme Court in 1915. That's the first. Again, Fayette County. In fact, both attorneys from Fayette County. Sweeney from Fayette. The last African American to be elected to the legislature from Fayette County, this 1896-1918 period, is a man named John V. Coleman. John V. Coleman, Kimberly, Valley. The Valley there's a reason for this. Two Montgomerys and a Kimberly. Heavy Black population in those areas. Heavy Black population. You know, Fayette County's population in 1900, Black population, was 18%. 1900 was 18.7% was the Black population here. What is it today? 4%. But 120 years ago, it was 18, almost 19% of the population. Which county did many Blacks leave to work in the mines from Fayette? What county did they go to? You know what county that is? McDowell. McDowell County is a population of 25%, almost a quarter of McDowell. The highest percentage of Black population in the state is in McDowell. Fayette used to be the highest, and we're down to 4%. McDowell's 23%. It's really shifted big time after 1920. John V. Coleman he'd been a coal miner. He had been active in his community. He had been active in his church. He was an organizer for the UMW. Also Republican. They're all Republican, all four of them. He's elected in 1918. John V. Coleman, while he was in the legislature, he promoted some of the same things I keep talking about. Also, he pushed hard for especially coal mine safety more than probably any of the others. He had been, that was all about. John V. Coleman. Coleman's the last elected. Now, we've had two other Blacks in the legislature, but they were appointed. Probably most of you probably knew Lucille Meadows. Lucille was a teacher for many, many years and active in the WPA, the West Virginia Education Association, the Fayette County Education Association. She was involved in her Second Baptist Church in Fayetteville. She was in everything. Lucille Meadows. Lucille got appointed when John Hatcher, who was in the House of Delegates, was appointed judge. Governor Gaston Caperton appointed Lucille to take the rest of his term. Then Lucille didn't finish the term. She was appointed Governor Caperton to the Ethics Commission. And then she was replaced by Frank Robinson, who served, to serve any session. I think it was just a couple, maybe 3 or 4 months, and that got her term. So those two were Democrats. So you have 4 elected Republicans and 2 appointed Democrats from Fayette County, and 6 African Americans in the legislature from our county. And the reason that I have looked at the 1896-1918, because that's when we're having Fayette County Blacks being just continuously one after the other. We get with 4 in a 22-year period, 4 elected and 1 for 3 terms. So I consider that the zenith of all the Black political power in Fayette County, 1896-1918. So that is, I have so much more, but Bill Hannabass is not going to allow it. So I'm going to have to cut it short. I have so much more. I could go over a lot of numbers and statistics and all kinds of other things. I have so much more, but I just synthesized it to this, just just went over these 4 people. Now we have other speakers, as Hannah Bass has mentioned. Next Saturday, Reverend Ronald English, who, by the way, was an aide to Martin Luther King, and also, I think, spoke at Martin Luther King's funeral. Reverend Ronald English is a vice president of the Kanawha County NAACP minister. He's done so much. His resume is extremely long. If you look at the life and times of Ronald English, he'll be here next Saturday at 6. I'm really excited to hear what he has to say. Then on the 19th, as Chavez already mentioned, I'm just going to reiterate it. Dr. Brucella Jordan, you may know her. She's the widow of Norman Jordan. You remember Norman? And he was the one that did a lot of one-act plays. He portrayed Carter Woodson. Was Norman Jordan. Sometimes I think he wrote poetry. Several of his books were published out in the California school system out there, out in Los Angeles over the years. Norman was very active in so many things. Set up the museum, Black Museum in Anstead was Norman. And this is his widow, Brucella. She has a PhD, and her dissertation topic was Ida B. Wells. Ida B. Wells was an early Black feminist, activist, civil rights leader. She was born in 1862, died in 1931. She will be highlighted by Dr. Brucella Jordan from Anstead. I will tell you this, her son was a student. Now, on February 26th, the Reverend Matthew Watts, a Fayette County native over at Mount Hope. He's an extremely important figure in the Kanawha Valley. I think he's a pastor of the Grace Bible Church. He's active in the NAACP. He's also active in a developmental foundation group. You name it, he's done it. And he will be here to speak to us on the 26th, a native Fayette Countyan. I think everybody who's been speaking here on this series is a Fayette County, except Reverend English. I don't know where he's originally from, but the others I know are from Fayette. So I really like that, the idea we have local talent. That's what it is. Is there any question that won't require a 10, 15-minute answer? Carter Woodson's there. I think Chris H Payne is there. By the way, let me tell you something about that. It's very hard to find these people's picture. None of them leave any papers. You do research, everybody, you research somebody, they got papers. They left letters, documents, boxes, and whatever. I found no papers for any of them. I think they all should be on there. I don't know if they all are or not, because we were involved in that in 2013. I remember that Wall of Honor at the courthouse. I know Chris H Payne's there and Carter Woodson's there. I don't know about the others, Ellis. And now, by the way, when Coleman went to the legislature, there already were other Blacks there. He was the 4th from Fayette, but the first 3 were the first in history. The first ever. When Coleman went, he wasn't the 4th ever. There were others already there when he got to Charleston. A delegate Nutter, delegate Capehart from Kanawha County. They were very prominent in the legislature, and he worked with them in 1918. By the way, some of these people ran for office again but didn't get elected. Some of these people ran for the legislature in years beyond 1920, but didn't quite make it. This was their shot at it. Ellis, of course, 3 terms, which makes him stand out in the crowd. And he will be dedicating his historic marker in Bluefield so it gets here in the spring. Council unanimously supported that as well. Council unanimously supports all these projects. It's 7-0 for the James Ellis marker, 7-0 for these lecture series. It's 7-0 for the funding to bring these people in as honorary. The council has been extremely supportive of these projects, and I think that speaks well. Progressive ideas, and I'm really happy to work with them. I'll say that to Jenny right now when she's sitting. She's the one that's here. She's right, folks. You can't see her. She sits every month for our meetings. So I don't know, Matthew, that if not, they should be there, and finding their pictures is a little rough. I can tell you. I will tell you that Payne's is the easiest to find. The others, I found them, but they're not good copies. Found them all. They're really good, but it's the best I can find. And again, with no papers, and that makes it hard if you don't have anything back there, any kind of written documents, any letters, any kind of correspondence, nothing on any of them. So that makes it really rough. Sir. Four.
Three opportunities, three schools that provide opportunities.
No, those three black schools only took black students. Black, male and female. No, Bluefield State, West Virginia State, and Store only took black students. Took no white students. Yes, male. Yes, it was integrated in that. Yes. Men and women. Store College, something is just like people don't think about too much. Do you know in 1954, when Brown versus the Topeka Board of Education, the Supreme Court struck down segregation? Remember that from your history. Do you know what striking down that segregation hurt a lot of historic colleges? A lot of Store College went on because now students didn't have to go to Store College. If you're black, you can go to WU, Marshall, Fairmont State, anywhere you want. So a lot of the students just said, I'm going over here to Store College. It's still close to the board. And look at Bluefield State, it had a hard time as well. Now you go anywhere. Same with Washington State. Those schools had to reinvent themselves because now they had to accept white students too. It changed the whole dynamics. And Store just couldn't handle it, and they might have gone to the spring of '55. So, their papers, by the way, if you want to look at Store papers, I'm sure you want to. If you want to read those, Western University has them all. They turned over all WU in the, I think it's over at Colby Hall. If you want to look at those over there, Store College. Interesting story. I don't have time for that, but I'm on a roll. Tried to. That's a good question. How did they get elected? Well, I'll tell you how they got elected. These black politicians had a voting block. You have 18% of your county black. 18%. Not all voters, of course, some children in there, whatever. But you're getting, and women get vote to 1920. So you're not having men. You had a block of votes that wouldn't let them. They're going to vote for you no matter what. I'll tell you what else you had. You didn't vote by primary ballot. You voted by convention. These Republican kingpins would do these conventions, and there's where they nominated everybody. You weren't out there just to throw your ballot and say mark it the way you want. You had to go to a convention, nominate candidates for county office, and nominate candidates for legislative office. But look at this: the black kingpins like Samuel Dixon, Colonel Berry, some of those people who were the linchpins when it came to political power in the county, Republicans, they wanted that black vote. They wanted the 18% block on all the votes. But they want that block. So the best way to get that block is what? Promote a candidate who you think could win regardless. And that's where they get these. These are all top-notch candidates that they run. These aren't people that have rather thin resume. They're all very heavy resume. They are chosen at convention where you can control the votes, control the delegates. But notice that no blacks are elected to the county offices at this time. There's no black county clerk, circuit clerk, prosecutor. justice of peace. None of that. County level, none. That's where all the patronage is. I'll let you go to the legislature. I'll help you get to the legislature. I'll promote you to the legislature. But I want you over here. People, I control that. I control the sheriff's office jobs. That's mine. What else did they do? See, nobody's elected in county. That is not an accident. It's all part of this whole political finagling. I could get more wound up in that, but I guess I thank you all for showing up. Thank you, Miss Reed, brought some cookies over here. So help yourself. And next week, I hope to see you all here to hear Reverend Ronald English talk about his time with Reverend Martin Luther King.